Hey guys, Simon here with HobbiesofaMan. Once again, and today we're going to be doing another comic book review. We're going to be looking at Mirka Andolfo's Mercy, published by Image, as you guys can see right there. There is a second story in this series, but it hasn't come out yet, even though this book says that it was supposed to come out in 2021. So it is what it is. Mirka Andolfo actually recently did a tweet or a Facebook post where she talks about the second story coming out sometime soon. It just hasn't happened yet, but I don't know, it's interesting. This is a very good Halloween read. So I recommend you guys check it out. The demographic here is mature. Yeah, it is mature. And I would definitely say that it is mature. It has a lot of themes and elements here that are maybe not for, young teenagers. So, yeah, the genres here are fantasy, historical fiction, and you could almost say horror, like eldritch horror, but not exactly, because nothing is really scary, even though the imagery is really violent and gory, right? So your mileage may vary there. In terms of adaptation, it does not have one, although this would be a really cool 2-hour animated movie. I just don't think that Mirka Andolfo has that kind of pull yet. So yeah, in terms of a rating, it's a 4 out of 5. Sorry, I was about to say 4.5, but that's not the case. It's a 4 out of 5. The rating was good. The art style was great. It just doesn't really have like the extra little oomph to get it to 5 out of 5, right? So yeah, the premise is that there's this little town somewhere in the Pacific Northwest near Canada, I think, called Woodsboro. And this little town happens to have this deep, concerning past. And the secret, which is that they have these like eldritch vampire horror things stalking their land. And the story follows this lady, Lady Helene, as she comes back to this town and ruffles feathers with her, vampiric abilities. And so it's really, really interesting. I really liked it. I thought it was really, really good. It reminds me of something, but I just can't remember what it was. Like there is like a movie or a TV show that I remember that feels like this, and it might have been an episode of a TV show. I don't know if it was like Lost Girl or maybe it was like even Vampire Diaries or something. It has this kind of feel of like this like lady that was prominent in the city come back later on and change things because she turns out to be a vampire, right? So interesting stuff. It's cool. I like it. So the plotline here opens with this eldritch horror imagery, then flashes forward in time and introduces us to Lady Swanson and her children, and Rory and John and Betsy, who are all kind of the major characters here. Then it switches to Helene and Goodwill coming into town. And at some point in this part of the story, we also get introduced to the situation that happened in the Swanson mine that made it not be a viable place to work at anymore because of this major accident that happened at some point in the past, which is why a lot of people don't like Lady Swanson in the town, right? And so, yeah. Then it gets started with the kind of scary situations here in town because of this addition of these vampires into the city, right? Or into the townsfolk, right? And bodies with plants start appearing everywhere, and people blame it on the Woodsboro monster, which some people think is a protector, some people think is a demon, and it's kind of nebulous what it is, right? Helene and Goodwill are these eldritch vampires, and Rory meets them in a really convoluted but well thought out kind of situation that works well because it is exactly what a child would do. She meets Lady Helene, and because of a description she was given of her mother, she thinks that Lady Helene is her mom. And we think that for the whole story, basically. And it works really, really well. I really like that. There is a twist situation that happens later on, but for the vast majority of the time, it works really, really great. I like that the way that story is portrayed. It's very, very nice. And so Rory and Helene end up being together. They end up being a family unit for a bit, even though Helene is definitely not interested, but something about her works and feels meaningful. And so Helene is attracted to Rory in this kind of like motherly sense, which is great. I like it. Rory and Helene end up outside doing something. I can't remember what it was. They get attacked, and this is the right opportunity for Helene to take Rory in and have her be like her child now. And so that makes Goodwill this like grandpa character. And then we have a lot of interesting interactions here where we get introduced to these like Native American vampire hunters called, well, actually, I don't know what they're called, like their organization. I don't know what it's called, but their leader is called Fox, and it's a woman, and her crew. And there's these social interactions with Helene and Swanson that are very rife with tension, and they work really, really well. And then it turns out that basically Helene is trying to fit in because she eventually wants to own the Swanson mine. And the Swansons are not ready to give it to her because of the dark past concerning them and Lady Swanson knowing something important about them, right? Then Fox and her crew attack Goodwill, and Helene goes to try to save him. And there's this big twist there. It connects with Mercy, which is like the name of the series, but it's also a character that we don't really get introduced to until this very moment. So I'm not really going to talk about it too much. Then there's a big lore dump, a big battle, and Helene manages to seduce the Swanson son. Then we have a lot more background story. We get a lot of situations here that are kind of like social tension situations. They're not necessarily like action situations, and I think that works really well for like the historical fiction aspect of this, so I like that. Eventually, we do kind of wrap up the story. We think it's going to work nicely, and then there's a big battle at the end, another big twist, and then the story ends. And it ends in a very satisfying note. I quite liked it. It is kind of a fast wrap-up, which I think Mirka Andolfo likes to do, but it's one that in this case works really well because we understand, you know, like the situation here from the get-go. So it works well. And I really liked it. I thought it was great. In terms of characters, we have the Swansons, Lady Swanson, and Joel, who's her like man-at-arms, basically, and then her son, and then her two other children. Now, I don't really care about any of their names, but the Swanson son, the adult one, is important because Lady Helene seduces him, right? You have Helene, who is also connected to Mercy. Then we have Goodwill, Rory, who is, the main character that we kind of follow through the story, more or less. We have John and Betsy, and they're not that important, but they end up being kind of integral to several plot points throughout the story, so that's why I keep mentioning them. We have Fox as well, and again, they're not really important, but they end up being part of the plot, so that's why they get a mention. In terms of artwork, it's so good, and in terms of fan service, we do get a little bit, like there's a little bit of TNA, but most of the situations where it's happening are more about the vulnerability and kind of like the imagery of it. Like, they are not wearing clothes, so they are at their most vulnerable, instead of like, oh, look at this titillating stuff, right? So there is TNA, but it is not for the sake of like throwing a bone at the audience. It is more like there is important imagery that this conveys, right? So overall, I think Mirka Andolfo manages to balance her eroticism, like her tendency to do that, with like the needs of the story very well, which is good. I really like that. And the artwork is also great, and the colors are wonderful. There's a lot of purples and whites here that work really, really nicely, as well as really bright pinks for some of the plant life that comes from this eldritch horror thing, right? So really good stuff. It's a bit of a rating. It's a 4 out of 5. I did have some issues with the order of events, not necessarily what the events told, and so there was a little bit of a problem with how the story was structured, but it was so minimal that it really didn't affect me all that much. So that's why it's a 4 out of 5. But if those issues wouldn't have been there, it would have probably been a 4.5 out of 5 or a 5, depending on my feelings at the time, right? So there you go. That's Mercy by Mirka Andolfo. Leave me a like and comment down below. Let me know what you thought. And thank you so much for watching. And see you guys later.